Hello, my name is Andrew Gomison, and it's that time again, time for a brand new episode of the Speaking for Him podcast. If you're a longtime listener to the show, maybe you remember that several years back, I had a Speaking for Him book club, and my friend Naomi Van Harn and I did that for several years, and I really enjoyed it. I haven't been able to replicate that again, but for the last several years, I've been coming to you with my favorite books that I've read the previous year, because since 2019, I've been keeping a detailed record of the books that I read. I highly recommend this practice, by the way, because it's just fun to look back and see what you've read and consider what you want to read in the future. So I'm excited to dig into this topic with you. If you enjoy this podcast, will you please share this episode with your family and friends so that they too can avail themselves of the content of Speaking for Him? I'm here each and every Wednesday with the Speaking for Him podcast and each and every Monday with the Culture Watch podcast. And I'm so thankful for everyone who listens. I'm excited to dig into my list of some of the best books of 2025. But before I do that, allow me to share with you my quote of the day. And this quote comes from Jane Austen, of all people. She wrote this in Pride and Prejudice. I'm not sure which character said this, but they said of reading, "I declare, after all, there is no enjoyment like reading. How much sooner one tires of anything than of a book. When I have a house of my own, I shall be miserable if I have not an excellent library." And that is Jane Austen from Pride and Prejudice. And I really appreciate this quote because I really see the value of having a good library and being a voracious reader. I truly believe that if you read, you can go anywhere and learn anything. I think it's important to encourage, especially our young people, to read. So that's why I make it a point to talk about reading once a year here on the podcast. Now, I noticed as I was looking back at the books that I have read that I did not read as much last year as I do some years, but I hope that you will appreciate the 4 titles that I have picked out to share with you today. And I think this is going to be a fun look at some solid reads that can help you as you are working through your summer reading list. We all have a little bit more time in the summer, it seems. So I thought it was timely to come to you with some of my favorite reads of 2025. So now, without further ado, let's get into the main segment of today's podcast. So today I want to start with a book that I read because I saw a movie that this book was based on in theaters. Now, the movie starred Mark Wahlberg as a long-distance racer who worked with the team to cover long distances in different countries and climates. And during the course of that time, a dog started following him on the race journey, and he ended up adopting that dog and calling him Arthur the King. So this book is the basis for that movie. So the real gentleman that this story is about is Mikael Lindnord, and he is Swedish. And sadly, I was just reading before I sat down to record this that Arthur has since passed away, the real dog, and that is kind of sad. But as I said, I'm really excited to share about this book with you. Now, this book was very interesting and intriguing. I don't think that I had ever heard of someone doing the kind of long-term adventure races that these people were doing. They sought sponsorships so they can get equipment so they could run, and these races were days and days long. And basically what happened is this dog was in the jungle where they were doing their race and started following along with them on the rest of the racetrack. And unbelievably to everyone involved, he kept up with the racers. And so the decision was made by Mikael to keep this dog, and I believe they had the dog for about 7 years after they received him, because he was approximately 7 when they got him, and then he died between the ages of 11 and 13. It wasn't really clear from the information I found how old he was when he died, but they had him for basically the second half of his life. So I just thought this was a very interesting read. It's an adventure story. It's fun because it's a true story. The one thing I will say about it is that it gets a little slow at times. When I gave my review on Goodreads, that's what I said, and in that case, because it was slow, I gave it a lower rating than I would have otherwise. But I fully recommend this book. I think you'll find it interesting. And as I said, I never read about this kind of athletic competition before, so that alone made it very interesting to enjoy and to think about. And so I would encourage you to read Arthur by Mikael Lindnord. And if you watch the video version of this podcast, which by the way, I'm having a lot of fun producing for you now over on YouTube, you can actually see the book covers of the books that I am sharing with you today. So the second book that I want to share with you is Flipped. And Flipped is a very interesting book because I also watched the movie of this book, and I thought it was just a really sweet movie, and it was a traditional teen romance in the best way because it was a story from the 50s or 60s, and it talked about how a boy and a girl who kind of tolerated each other, especially the boy, then grew to admire one another and enjoyed having a friendship which blossomed into a bit of a romance as they got a little older. But what I liked about it is there are some books that are considered young adult, so basically for teenagers, that have swear words and sexual content in them, and definitely mature situations that go above and beyond what someone of a young age should be considering or thinking about. And I really feel like it's a nice switch to have this book flipped, where it's just a sweet, simple story. And I also would say that I would recommend both the movie and the book. And I feel like the movie captured the book in a way that few movies actually captured book adaptations. I think one of the things that helped it was because it was a short book, and short books translate really well into movies because a lot of times when you're making a book into a movie, you're trying to take an 8 or 10 hour book, or maybe even a 12 or 14 hour book, and consolidate it into an hour and a half or 2 hour movie. And it just doesn't work that well. And in this case, um, it works very well. And I really appreciated this book. I appreciated it for its realism too, because it didn't just leap off into romance. It really showed some of the confusion that adolescents go through for this type of thing. So I really appreciate that. And this book is by Wendelin van Draanen, and it's actually a very interesting story of how I saw the movie, because I was actually flying with my brother to the Philippines. I think it might have actually been on the return trip from the Philippines where I saw the movie. I think I might have seen that it was available on the way there. And then on the way back, I decided to give it a try, because when you're sitting on an international flight and they give you access to a bunch of movies, the most fun part is just flipping through the movies and trying to find something to watch. But eventually, you hope that you settle on something with plenty of time to watch it. Now, the cool thing about international flights is that they're typically longer, so you usually have time to sleep a little bit and still watch a couple movies. But anyway, I saw the movie Flipped, and then I realized, because of the credits, I think, that it was based on a book, and I decided to look up the book, and I was not disappointed. So another wholehearted recommendation from me is the movie and the book Flipped. So as we move on through this list, it's kind of interesting because I ended up with 3 biographical books and only 1 fiction book, which is pretty exciting actually when I really take the time to think about it. The next book that I want to share with you is called Just Add Water, and this is by Olympic swimmer Katie Ledecky. Katie Ledecky is one of the most decorated individual Olympic women swimmers in history, and I remember being so impressed by Katie, because there was a time several years back when she could have turned pro and given up college swimming to just make money and train for Olympics and not worry about college swimming. But she really wanted the college swimming experience, so she delayed turning pro so that she could be an NCAA athlete. It's kind of weird now looking back, because now there's NIL money. Of course, I don't know how that works for the less popular sports like swimming, as opposed to the football players and the basketball players who can easily make millions. But whatever the case may be, I really respected Katie for her determination not to um, go right into pro swimming, because she wanted to stay humble and continue to have um, the college experience. And her story was just very interesting. And she seems to be a really genuine person. I wrote in my Goodreads review for this book that she seemed to be the type of person that I would want to hang out with and spend time with. And so that's kind of an exciting thing to realize, that at least according to the pages of her book, that Katie is a very down to earth person. And so I just really appreciated the emphasis that she had on how important her family was and how she enjoyed swimming, and realized that she had to put in the effort to become a top tier Olympian, and how that effort was rewarded. It was really a good book, and I truly recommend this, and I feel like she is a good athletic role model. So I really recommend Katie Ledecky's Just Add Water. For the final book that I want to talk about today, it is Reagan by Max Boot. And this one was a long book. This one took quite a while to read. I don't remember exactly how much. One thing that I started doing a couple years, I believe, into writing down all my books is writing down the date that I started and the date that I ended. And I don't remember how long this took. I don't have it in front of me, but I do know that it was a number of months And so it was a very long book, but it was very interesting. So I would really recommend it. I think that Reagan is one of the most fascinating presidents we've ever had, because he was an actor, but he was also determined to broaden his horizons, and he was a natural speaker. They called him the Great Communicator. That was one of his presidential nicknames. He guided America through the Cold War. The one thing that I will say and negative about this book is it does seem, as you're reading, that there were several times when Max had an axe to grind with Reagan, and he would kind of give the event that happened and kind of his opinion of how Reagan responded to it without always including the context of said decision, or especially having the idea that someone's opinions and beliefs can change over time. But overall, if you like political books and you like biographies and you maybe are fascinated with Reagan, as so many people are, I think that you will like this book. And I truly uh, endorse this book as a very solid quality read. Now, it is a longer book. This is one thing that I was thinking about before I sat down to record this. Is I remember a couple of years when I was working at Potter's House, where I read, 30 plus books, and even one year where I read 52 books. But they weren't all that long, and I had a lot more time where I was commuting back and forth from home to work and from work to home. So I spent a lot of that time reading in the car, and I don't have uh that commute time anymore. And so I get caught up with other projects related to ministry, and I don't read as much as I should. And I will admit that I also find it easier to watch a TV show or a movie at night sometimes than sit down with my audiobooks or a regular book. So those are 4 titles that I find very beneficial to me, and I hope that you will enjoy reading them if you decide to take any of them up for the summer. Um, Please feel free to write to me and let me know what books you are reading. I know I mentioned this before, but if you leave me a voicemail on my blog, I would be delighted to play that voicemail on a future podcast. So maybe if you want to share with me a couple books that you think I should read, that you think I would find beneficial, you can share that in a voicemail, and I would be glad to share that in a future episode this summer. Let's help each other out. Let's have some fun. And maybe even that will be the impetus for restarting the Speaking for Him book club in another format. For those that don't know, as I mentioned before, in the early part of this podcast, several years ago when I hit a podcasting wall, I was talking with my friend Naomi, and through the course of our conversation, we were talking about reading, and we decided mutually that it would be a good idea to start the Speaking for Him book club. And as a part of that book club, I would read one classic book a year, and by classic, it had to be older, and it was generally one that I'd heard a lot of people talk about, but I had never read myself. And then I would always read a Christian growth title, and I would always read a Christian fiction title, and I would always read a biographical or autobiographical title. And I think we did that for 3 or 4 years, maybe 5. And it was a real blessing to me that we did that. So I may get back to that at some point. If there are people that are interested in joining me on a revamped version of the Speaking for Him book club, please let me know, because I would love to have a new special co-host for that adventure. My friend Naomi is not in a life place where she can do that with me at this time once again, but it's something that would be definitely a blast to be able to set up once again. Well, before I end the show today, let me review very quickly the titles that I told you about. First of all, we had Arthur, and the subtitle is The Dog Who Crossed the Jungle to Find a Home. And it's just so interesting that the Lindnords didn't know anything about his early life. Like I said, they met him in an international jungle. The hassle that they went through to bring him home to Sweden so he could be their dog is adventure enough to read the book. So again, I totally appreciate this book. And while it may be slow in parts, it's a highly recommended read from me. The second book we talked about is Flipped. And again, I just like the old-fashioned sweetness and wholesomeness of this book. It was a teen romance in the sweetest of ways, without all the added pressure and filthy content that many teen books have today. Then we turned to sports with Just Add Water, written by Katie Ledecky, who I respected before I read the book, but I respect even more having read the book, and I just think this will be a great read for anyone that likes sports and particularly likes swimming. If you're an aspiring Olympian or you just want to compete at a high level in swimming, whether it be rec league, high school, or college, you'll want to check out Katie Ledecky's book. And then finally, I talked about Reagan, which is a definitive biography of our 40th president, which is about 600 pages long. I don't remember exactly. I know it's multiple 100 pages long, so it's a long read. It took me a few months to read, but I think it is well worth it. And so I would encourage you to read Reagan by Max Boot. So I hope that you enjoy these titles. If you do add them to your summer reading list, please let me know. As I said earlier, let me know of any books that you think I should read this summer, because I'm always looking for new reads. And I just hope you have a blast reading this summer. Whatever you decide to read, reading is fun. You can go anywhere. You can do anything within the pages of a book. And a book plus your imagination is a very powerful thing. But as LeVar Burton once said on Reading Rainbow, you don't have to take my word for it. Well, that's all I have to share with you on today's edition of the Speaking for Him podcast. I very much appreciate you listening to this show, and I hope that it has been a blessing to you. If it has, could you share it with your family and friends? Maybe pick 3 to 5 people who have not yet heard the content of Speaking for Him and could be benefited and encouraged by what I have to share each week. I would truly appreciate it. You can share your comments, questions, or concerns with the contact information that's about to roll at the end of the show. And with that being said, have a great week and keep serving the best of masters.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Your host has been Andrew Gomison, founder of Speaking4Him. For information on today's show and to leave us comments and voicemails, please visit Speaking4Him. That is speaking numeral 4 him.blogspot.com. You can find Andrew's ministry at speaking4him.com. That's speaking the number 4 HIM.com. And when you look for us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or all other major podcast platforms, let us know what you think of the podcast by leaving a rating and a review. Intro music for this podcast is provided by Audio Kraken. Transition music is provided by Superstate. Both of these tracks are available free of charge from pond5.com, pond numeral 5.com.